Hi, I'm going live a minute or two early. I wanted to get everyone on here. I hope this is working. Hi. Hey, everyone. I hope everyone brought their books, or if you have not read Good for a Girl by Lauren Fleshman, I hope that you go and you pick up your book. This is an incredibly wonderful and inspiring book, not only for athletes and female athletes, but just an inspiring and inspirational book that will just inspire you, for lack of a better word. But I'm really excited to chat with Lauren and get into why she wrote this book and all about her background and all of her insane accomplishments. So let's see if we can find Lauren. And if anyone has any questions, feel free, put them up, and let's get into this. I wish I was better at Instagram living, but such is life. Let's see if I can find Lauren. I particularly just love this book. I'm an athlete and a runner, as some of you know, and I love any book that breaks barriers and gives tips and insights into what they did to become a better human or break barriers, and just provide insight into like such a, I don't know, wonderful, amazing work ethic and badass. What book am I talking about? I'm talking about Good for a Girl by Lauren Fleshman, who is here. Hi! Let me get on. Let's see. Go live. Here we go. Inspirational books about teens. I can get back to you about that, but this is a great book that's inspirational that teens would absolutely love. Lauren starts her book as, from being a young girl through her teenage years. So I definitely feel like it's a great book for teens. And I wish I had access to this book when I was a teenager, because it definitely would have been amazing to have.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Good. I'm
Good.
so jealous of your bookshelf.
Oh, thank you. I am a hoarder of books, that's for sure. Books and recipes, as I'm relate. Sure you are as well. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just so honored. I know that you're probably running everywhere to get this book out there and chat to as many people as possible. So I feel really lucky to be chatting with you right now. And
thank you for being enthusiastic about it and supportive from the very beginning. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm a huge fan. And before I just sing you praises about what a badass you are, do you want to do a quick intro about you and all the many hats that you wear, or shoes?
Well, I'd say today my number one job is being a mom. My daughter's on an Octonauts show right now, home from school. She's 5. I have a 9-year-old son too, so I've got that going on. I'm an author. I've written 1 book, and it's a New York Times bestseller, and it's making a big impact in my community, which is just so fulfilling after 3 years of really hard work. I have been an elite coach for a professional women's running team for 8 years. And before that, 13 years as a professional athlete, traveling the world, racing the best runners on the planet. And my specialty was the 5K and the 1,500 meters. And then I did, 1 marathon during my professional career. And then I raced Boston 11 years later, last year. In a totally different state of mind. So I'm a recreational runner now, and I like it a lot better, honestly. I miss the global travel, but I really love the amount of joy. It's just so much more joy forward more often running at this stage of my life. And just being really a social exerciser is just so amazing. I had so much of my life where I had to kind of like miss out on things, miss weddings, miss family reunions, and make everybody's schedule work around my professional training schedule. And I just don't like moving through the world that way. And this is a much more collaborative time of life.
That's awesome. I mean, you wear so many different hats. Mother being obviously number one, which it's awesome. I also have a 5-year-old
Nice.
daughter and a 9-year-old son. And that itself is like, just being a mom in general is a huge accomplishment. And on top of it, to be able to be the type of athlete and leader and academic and writer, I mean, I think for me personally, you're incredibly inspiring. And I was just floored, and your book really resonated with me. I was a soccer player growing up and played in college a bit, and I just love, not only being just a mom, but also an athlete. Like all of the things you bring to the table in your book, I find that not only for your community, I'm sure the running community, but just women in general, or athletes, or just human beings trying to like be executive functioning and firing at all cylinders, wearing different hats. So kudos to you. I think it's just a beautifully written book, and you're incredibly inspiring, and you've been getting amazing and wonderful reviews and making huge impacts all over. I'd like to even start with The Atlantic, which said, to quote, in 288 funny, honest, and sometimes wrenching pages, Lauren Fleshman makes clear that empowering girls to better understand the need for balance between pain and elite performance is not only the ethical thing to do, it's essential to their health and career longevity. That being said, I want to know what made you want to write this book, and why did you feel that now is the time to do that?
Throughout my whole career as an athlete, I spent most of the time like outside of the problems. Like I felt like I was on an American Ninja Warrior course, just like barely making it level to level, and watching people around me falling off the course into the water. And but then I would, like, we're deluded into thinking that if we're still making it in a broken system, then the system's fine. It's just the people, there's something wrong with the people who aren't making it through the system. And I went through a fair bit of my athletic career feeling that way, because that's the dominant messaging we're given in our communities. And then when I was humbled by my own injuries and disordered eating and having to climb back out of that, I started to develop a lot more empathy and compassion and humility from that experience that helped me see things differently. And then I think I just carried a lot of tenderness and pain for all of the pain and harm being caused in women's sports. And I'm a human biology major. I'm a science enthusiast. I'm not like an active scientist, but the science literacy and passion has had me following it for years and really understanding that girls and women are suffering stress fractures at 2 to 3 times the rate of their male peers. Our mental health, our anxiety is twice as high. Even in elite athletics, when in environments where you have resources and medical support and all of that, female athletes are still faring significantly worse in the thriving department than our male peers. And that's because the sports environments just, it kind of dawned on me over time, like, of course they are. These sports environments were built by men for men and boys a long time ago. And it's only been 50 years since we've had access to those spaces. And so now, at first, we just thought all we need to do is get in the room and we'll get all these benefits. But the bigger story is that, yeah, we get some of the benefits, but it's also a little bit of an ill-fitting suit. Like, we jumped into something and it wasn't designed for us. And so there's going to be places and times where that becomes abundantly clear. And the physical and mental health discrepancies are kind of a way of seeing that.
Do you feel that there's a big difference from when you started your running career to now? And if so, where do you think we could go from? Like, where, if there is a shift and you notice a shift, where can we go from here, or what can we do?
I think in some ways it's worse now, unfortunately, because of social media and the internet driving professionalism of youth sports. Like, coaches are using techniques and modalities designed for older athletes at a different stage of their development on younger and younger people in the name of chasing excellence. And that's just not developmentally appropriate, especially for female-bodied people in like the middle of the storm of puberty, when our bodies are still becoming, doing things like having weigh-ins or body fat measuring someone in the midst of body changes is like completely unproductive and harmful. There's very little to no benefit you could get from that during this state of like everything is changing anyway. Why measure it? But it can cause a lot of harm. It can just be the seed that's planted that makes somebody self-critical, hypervigilant, and self-conscious, and carry that through their life, and possibly end up resulting in eating disorders and other things like that that can have lifelong consequences that are very, very difficult to battle. So I just can't emphasize enough how like I get these messages still today, especially since the book came out, from high schoolers and college athletes that are saying that things are bad. Like parents are putting pressure on their daughters to lose weight when they hit puberty, when they experience a temporary slump in performance while adjusting to this new body. Their parents freak out, or their coach freaks out. There's scholarships on the line. There's ego on the line when we derive our own confidence from what our children do in the world. And so we're taking this natural rite of passage of puberty, something we should be celebrating, the becoming of the female body, and we're turning it into something to fear, to fight against, to try to reverse in order to protect this idea of athletic performance that a man's body or boy's body would be doing at that age. And we're just different. So that's the big thing in my book, is saying like, yeah, we're different. And if we don't acknowledge that, then that causes a lot of harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I wish I had access to your book when I was, we're the same age, but I obviously I have like a 1/1,000,000th of the accomplishments in terms of my athletics, but like playing soccer, and that was a big part of my upbringing. And Mia Hamm was like my idol and all of that time. And I just like the ups and downs, even in the soccer community, which you need to be a bit stronger and bigger. But like, being a midfielder, you have to like run the field. And it was certainly something that I used as a coping tool, and use that like scale, and being like so A-type and focused would, I had a serious eating disorder growing up, and it still to this day like affects me. And it was during puberty, and that affected a lot of developmental things. And I love that you're talking about it, because it is so different than a man's development in puberty, and then how that it can affect you later on in life. I think you go in and talk about how it sort of evens out in I think mid to later 20s. And you have a whole new career.
It's beautiful. This whole second wave that we have to look forward to, that's different from the male standard, that like still when I talk to high school students, they don't know about it. They think that if they hit puberty and they have a year or two, they slow down, or they don't, they feel awkward in their body, that's it. There's the signal. Oh, this new body means that I guess I lost whatever I had that made me good, that put me on that track to be great. It's like, no, don't make any conclusions right now. It'd be like taking a 13-year-old or 14-year-old boy and testing their singing voice, and then making a determination on how well they'd be able to sing as an adult. It completely makes no sense. I'm curious what it was in the book, like what, like maybe something specific from it that like got you rethinking, maybe a history with an eating disorder, or the state of mind and that you were in during that time. Like if there was something in the book that kind of brought up emotion for you around that.
Oh, I had multiple emotions. There are a lot of things that within your book that parallel my own, with my dad being like a driving force and really wanting to own this space. And Good for a Girl was something that really, for me, hit me deep. It makes me emotional even talking about it now, because I always felt equal. No one ever told me I wasn't equal. But then as soon as you get out there on the playing field, you're suddenly compared to, a different gender, and we don't grow at the same rate. We have different hormones. Our genetic makeup is totally different. And the pay, somehow the inequality in pay also justifies, your stance on where you sit. And so there's a lot of things that made me incredibly emotional and excited. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is like speaking to me, and not just, you know, one as an athlete, but then also now I'm a mom and I have a different career, and my soccer career didn't go, you know, farther. And I think a lot of that was because of my eating disorder, because I played on the boys varsity team at one point because we only had a JV team in high school, and I felt good enough for a girl, but I also was trying to compensate by being tiny and petite and be feminine and a woman at the same time. And I for me, it was more a way of control than it was of athleticism, but because it made me feel sleeker and faster, and that sort of thing, where I could be as fast as those boys because I was like so lean. But boy, as soon as they knock me over, I'd go flying. You know, it wasn't so fun on the bounce. But yeah, it really spoke to me, and I think what also I just loved so much was your insight and your ability to really look at the playing field and like look at your peers as competitors, but as inspirations. I feel like growing up, it became so toxic where you were pitted against each other. And sometimes I would take some of that on, and they were my enemy, even though they were my friend and my comrade and my teammate. But I love so much about how you change that narrative and flip that narrative. And I found it really inspirational. I feel like that's something that you can take into any sort of profession or any sport. I love that. Hear more about those peers and your ability to do that.
Because there's stages in my career where it's like when you're in a period of scarcity, when you feel like there's not enough for people like you, like it happens a lot with women in male dominated industries. So it's like, okay, well, there's only room for one or two of us in this room. And so even if deep down in your heart, you'd like to work together as a team, if there's the fear, the fight or flight type thing that's underneath the surface of trying to just keep your position of privilege, this rare spot that makes us more likely to tear each other down and protect our space, instead of like feeling safe enough. We need to be able to feel safe enough to lift others into the room with us, to do everything we can, versus being worried about being into competition with them. And so later in the book, you can see that I'm starting to see it differently. And a big part of that was when I left Nike and I joined a women's apparel company, Oiselle, out of Seattle. The contract terms changed. So as a professional athlete for Nike, it was very much like, if you're not top 3 ranked in the country, if you're not national champion, here's how your pay is going to get cut. Here's how your pay is going to get cut. And so you're kind of like looking around at the other Nike athletes that you want to be friends with, but then you're like, I actually kind of just need to kick your butt, because if I don't kick your butt, I better not get too close to you, because deep down you're trying to, it's like Game of Thrones out there. And then when I joined Oiselle, there were none of those stipulations. It was just like, here's your salary, as long as you're showing up, doing your best, and engaged on social media and doing the photo shoots and stuff that we need you to do, your pay is going to remain the same. And that security was like, oh, I can be friends with these women now. Like, I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. Yeah. So I think that's just like, it's present in so many other places besides sport, but it does strike me that how we need to be aware that when we're feeling like that, what feels like a kind of a gross competitiveness with one another, that it isn't really about her. It's about scarcity. It's about how we, like, the fact that we feel there's not enough. And then what we need to do is get together and change that.
Yeah, I agree. I hope you continue writing about this, and I would love to see a book about like the developing years, especially since you know it so well. I just think like a couple of people have been asking about are there any inspirational books about teenagers, and I feel like this would be such a great subject to be able to talk to our children about, especially our daughters. About
jealousy and envy. I feel like those are big ones that are also intertwined with that, like learning how to interpret feelings of jealousy and envy in a way that's more productive. Because I think that when we feel jealousy, we are trained to kind of think like oftentimes, well, I did this in the book when I didn't make the Olympic team and I became very jealous, but I wouldn't call it that. I made up a whole story about Kara Goucher, who did make the team, where she became kind of the villain in my personal narrative of how I was coping with the grief of not making the team. And really deep down, I was just jealous. It had nothing to do with Kara Goucher. It was just, jealousy is just teaching you that it's helping you see what you actually want for yourself. It doesn't matter who the person is that's getting it. It's just information. Hey, oh, I also want that for myself. Okay, how can I spend less time worrying about that person and more time focusing on, okay, now what do I need to do what are the steps I need to take to get this thing that I also want? And then that turns it into more of a positive. And then Kara and I didn't need to be at odds at all. In fact, I could probably learn from her.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I feel like we need to talk more about those feelings, and that they're informative and they're not directed as like the bad guy, but like this is telling me, or the anger that we have, like anger is a healthy emotion, but it's helping us get to like that next step and like deal with it, as opposed to like, I hate you, you're a bad guy, or it's like we need
I
to
wish that I had known when I was younger that feelings were information. I just didn't know. Like I really thought were bad feelings and okay feelings to have, feelings to be ashamed of having, and feelings to aspire to have more of. And thank God for, like, honestly, if I hadn't been a parent, I don't think I would have been motivated to try to learn that stuff, because feelings are so big that I was like, how the hell am I going to share feelings? And so then I had to do more digging around to help them. And I'm like, oh, it's like how they say being a parent can help you reparent yourself. That's definitely.
Yeah. That's so funny. We're going through some things right now with our kids. We have a almost 11-year-old boy, 9-year-old boy, and my daughter will almost be 6. And there's some like tricky feelings. I feel like when they were really little and the feelings were big, it was somehow easier to manage. But now as they're getting older and like dealing with more grown-up feelings like disappointment, it's becoming more challenging. I feel like because maybe it's something I have difficulty with. So I'm like, shit, I don't know, like it's like I'm unpacking this myself. Are there some things like that you find with your kids that feeling wise that are more challenging?
I think like what my son has he struggles with feelings of belonging. He's like just kind of a little bit different. He's kind of a unique personality, and friendships have been tough for him to forge. He doesn't feel like he has his person, and he doesn't have a group. And all around his school, he sees people that have a group. They have their people, and he can float among groups, but he never feels like it's not like people are telling him to go away, but he just doesn't feel like he truly belongs. And that is a real lonely feeling. And that's not a feeling that I had. Like I had a best friend in elementary school. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had one friend and we were literally stuck at the hip. Like we would often wear the same jacket on cold days, like slide into the same coat. And then when I joined sports, I had that feeling of belonging from being on a team. And he's not particularly interested in much organized sports. And so it's hard to watch him dealing with those feelings, and I don't really know how to help him other than making space for it. But it reminds me of in the book, like one of the big issues that comes up is like, how do we, like a lot of female athletes when they're going through these body changes have all these conflicted feelings about their body. Like you touched on needing like these feelings about wanting to be feminine, wanting to still be seen as feminine, but then also wanting to be ferocious and competitive. Yeah, wanting to be strong, but then does the way that strong body looks, however the sport you're playing forges your body with training, like how does that body look compared to what's celebrated in our culture? And then what kind of conflicting feelings do we have about that? Or even if we tell our girls, hey, you're gonna be hitting puberty between middle school and high school, and it's totally normal to have a period of time where you don't get better for a season or two, or maybe you feel even a little worse, and you can try to normalize it and not make that a negative, but it won't protect them from having feelings about it while it's happening, from it being hard. Right. And finding a way to kind of both normalize and celebrate a different pathway for a female athlete while also making space for feelings is tricky work.
Mm-hmm. It is tricky work, and thankfully, like being an athlete, I feel like you're able to take, or at least I was able to take a lot of that aggression or anger out through the sport. So, but I have a similar situation with with my middle, who also feels like he's not very sporty, and he's so it's challenging for me as well to like help with that, because finding the appropriate outlet and that sort of thing. Because when you have like such a, especially well, your sport's so interesting. I was going to say, especially when you have like a team, running is an interesting sport in that regard. What is that like, being an individual, but yeah, being on a team? What is that experience
except
like?
I played softball, which is like a true team sport. Can't win the game unless other people are doing all their individual, like showing up, and you have to work, you have to throw the ball together, like you have to do stuff like that. Whereas you're all running on a cross country team at the same time. They add up your points at the end, but you're not passing a ball along the way. You really just kind of start the race, run your race, and then cross finish line and turn around and wait for your teammates to show up, and then wait to find out how you did. Where the teamwork comes into play is like how you show up for each other in practice every day, what kind of team culture you're creating, so that on race day, you're all motivated to do your individual best for each other, because you still kind of feel a little bit alone out there on the race course. But I liked the individual agency part of running, where if I had a team that wasn't doing well in a given year, if people weren't motivated and weren't training hard, if I was motivated and I was training hard, I could still do well as an individual. It has a whole individual side. You can qualify for state or nationals as an individual or as a team, and you can't do that, I don't think, in soccer. You know, yeah, it's like one for all and all for one.
Not so much.
In sports like that.
Yeah. Not until you get to like you know, the ODP, and then they select you, but you still are a team. You can't win without your team, for sure. But that must be so cool. Yeah, and what a great experience to have that accomplishment, and yet also winning as a team. It's got to be pretty amazing. What made you fall into running, really love running?
Yeah.
Was there any
for the thing that continues to endure for me from the first run I went on in high school, first day cross country practice, to today, is that mixture of people, like socially moving with a social element, and connection, and then exploration. And now there's other reasons I additionally like it today, like for my mental health, for even alone time now, like it serves more functions than it used to. But those first two things still persist. I love exploring the trails, or even like the urban alleys, with my friends. And I love like getting into that space where I'm like breathing regular, like I'm breathing faster than I do the rest of my day, but I'm not so labored that it's miserable. It's just like this steady, like train chugging along feeling of momentum. And it starts to feel like my body's just running itself when I'm fit. When I've been doing it. It takes a while to get there, but that, oh man, that feeling is so good.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite ways also to get to know new cities when traveling. My husband and I, it's like the first thing we do is put on our running shoes and go run around the city, and I don't know, get like a quick like Reader's Digest version as we like buzz by. Like, okay, this is what we want to see.
I have such a great, just reminded me of when Jesse and I went to Paris once. We would follow each other in our competitions. They were always in the summer. He did triathlon and I did track. And so sometimes we'd get a little break between competitions. And so one time we flew into Paris and booked some really crappy hotel right next to the train station because we didn't know what we were doing. And we just put on our running shoes and we just took off, and like we're accidentally running by Notre Dame, like, just over bridges, over the river. Like, it was incredible. And to think like I was like, oh, I'll be able to do this anytime. And like, I don't get to do that very much anymore. But maybe one day again soon. It makes me happy to know you get to do that. Maybe I will.
Well, I hope you can do that. I hope, like, especially with your book, I hope that you're traveling the world, and I hope that you can go and speak to everyone. I feel like you're such an amazing resource and leader and inspiration. So I hope to see you in Paris soon.
Me too.
Running the streets of Paris.
Use the Strava. Do you use that? I don't know if there's any. I use Strava so that I can look at the global heat of a place, and that way I can see, like, just by like how dark the color is on a path, how often people run it. And that's been really great for finding things like people's favorite trail in a town or something, or favorite dirt road.
Yeah. I love Strava. I ran one marathon a couple years ago, and I used it heavily to help with my. It was amazing. It was such a gift. That and
Yeah.
I think it's all trails, like for trail running and stuff, which I love. So sorry, I tend to get off track. Okay, so your book has been out for 2 months now. What kind of feedback have you been
been so
getting
incredible
from your
and
readers?
varied. So the main people I wanted to reach were women and girls and people who care for women and girls, and or anybody who competes in the female category. And so that has been great because I've received a ton of messages from young people, from the parents of young people, and from this other group of like people who ran it that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, some in their 60s, the kind of people that it's a little bit in their rearview mirror now, their youth sports experiences, but they've been carrying a story about themselves from those years that oftentimes is completely untrue. Like, oh, I just wasn't dedicated enough. I didn't have what it took. They believed the myth that when my body changed in puberty, like I was no longer suited for it. So I gave it up. And this book is making them rethink their entire story of like, oh, wow, like it wasn't about my dedication. I was just going through puberty, or that coach told me I was being a head case and I just didn't care enough when I was experiencing that year where I was running slower or competing, a little bit worse than I had the year before. And it wasn't in my head. And there are people that'll be like, I thought I imagined it, when I talk about what the eating disorder culture was like and how all these unspoken things of being around overthinking what you're eating, overthinking the scale, and people will be like, I just thought I imagined it, because these are things we don't talk about openly. And that feels really good, because I feel like if you can shift someone's personal story just a little, it can completely change how they move through the world moving forward. And if you can encourage or like open the door for conversations that people have not felt they could have, and they can start having them, that creates a freedom, and that creates like an opportunity to eliminate or reduce shame from something that they may be carrying. And we all know that when we can heal some part of ourselves, like the ripples into our future are massive. So there's no wound too small to put the effort into heal, because you just don't know. You might have convinced yourself it's a small wound, like from high school basketball days, but once you spend a little time healing it, you're like, oh wow, this changes how I feel when I move through my body in the world. So those are really great things. And then a lot of like dads who have either they have young girls and they really want to do right by their daughters, which makes me so encouraged, just like the amount of care of this generation of fathers compared to previous generations, like how active they want to be in their children's lives, like really truly meaningfully involved. And then there's the dads whose kids have already left home and they're empty nesters, and they're struggling with some of the things that they now realize weren't helpful, that they may have caused harm from perpetuating some of these myths around the female body, and feeling bad about it and wanting to be accountable and be better. And then there's coaches, most of them are men, because just most coaches are men, and I'm just so honored they're reading the book, and that they're willing. Like, I get messages from them saying, I've screwed up some of these things. I'm so glad you wrote this book, because I will stop making those mistakes. And like that, those things just are so heartening. You just got to imagine that the effects will create a ripple in a way that I'll never really know. Like, we'll never really know. But if my dream would be 20 years from now, someone picks up my book and they're like, why the hell was this a New York Times bestseller? This book makes no sense. Like, everything in this book is irrelevant.
That would be badass, exactly. Because then it means we've made change. Yeah, I would love that. I love that what you just said, just echoing about like your teenage self and like puberty and having those wounds, because it's just so common.
Yeah.
And it's so big at that moment, and it follows and carries with you. I mean, there are things about that experience for me that I am still like working through, and reading your book really helped me feel like I wasn't alone through that, because a lot of that, like you were writing about certain people who were, you know, not with the group, who like would eat differently or were busy and had to like go train harder or whatever. And I felt like that was me. And I didn't get a lot of friendships often because I would isolate myself, and I felt a little like crazy, you know, trying to like power through that. So that was, I felt like that was very healing for me to feel like I wasn't alone in that experience and be a little
That's
bit
good.
more gentle with myself.
Yay.
So I do really
Look how much community you build up, surrounded by people.
So, it's amazing. I mean, it really is. You know, the weird thing about social media, it's like, I call it the antisocial, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but it's just like the hardest medium. But on the flip side, like if we use it for good, for experiences like this, to be able to talk about things that maybe are a little bit uncomfortable, and, you know, especially you who's really like seen it all, and the amount of dedication and hard work. I mean, being a Stanford graduate, you know, and not only, you know, with your athletics, but your academics and your ability to be curious. And it's just such a great, wonderful opportunity. And so, you know, having this moment to be able to connect in this way and talk about things that are really challenging and hard is it's pretty phenomenal.
It makes me
so
want to
I
a
appreciate
5-star Yelp review to Instagram. I'm a fan.
Right. Perfect. And then blogging.
No, I haven't blogged in a while, but it's something that I'm thinking of picking back up, and I've got to look into, like, do I want to do a Substack? Do I want to, you know, like all that stuff? I don't really know. But it was hard for me to imagine ever writing anything again for a while, because I was just so burnt out from trying to get the book done, get the book right. And now, excuse me, I'm sneezing. Starting to think,
no, you're fine.
I'm starting to get a little itch again. And that feels so good. Like, gosh, burnout is like not a very great place to live.
No kidding. Yeah. And not feeling inspired and or just being angry and grumpy at the process is not very fun. But you're just so good at it. And especially like as you keep talking about that experience of your younger self and that development, like, man, that would be amazing. I think you said, and I'm going to butcher it, but like embodying our younger self or something along those lines. But I definitely think you need a follow-up book at some point. Please. I'm hoping for one. And last question. What are you inspired by, and what are there books that you particularly love or gravitate towards?
Oh yeah, well, I love any book that makes me understand someone else's experience that I wouldn't otherwise understand. So that's one of the reasons I love memoir so much. Like, I'll read all kinds of books, fiction, like the occasional, well, I like self-help books a lot actually, but like when someone brings personal story into it and they do that well, like that's the most powerful way to shift my perspective in a lasting way. So Alison Mariella Désir's book, Running While Black, was a book that did that for me, because I always had this idea that running was for everyone in this welcoming space, and all we need to do is have a pair of shoes and you can do it. And her book just really like shifted my thinking on that. And I was so grateful for someone to take the time to let me in on that experience, so that I could really see running for what it's like and what the obstacles are for people to join a community who aren't white, or who aren't thinner, or who hear that they don't look like a runner. And then of course you end up learning something in exploring running and race. You end up learning things about well beyond running that you can use. So I love books like that. And then books about to help me become a better parent, or help me be a better partner. And I like the growth, you know. And I read a lot of books with my 9-year-old. We're currently reading The Hunger Games, which may or may not be a parenting decision, considering it's kids killing each other.
I think it's brilliant. And anything that you read and can suspend belief, I think is awesome. And create, you know, all the imagination. I think it's awesome. I mean, they have all this shit anyways.
True.
On, you know, they
it's
go to
everywhere,
Netflix.
And it's so sweet reading with him, because a couple of years ago, he just took off as a reader. And he, you know, when you're tired as a parent, it's like such a gift when your kid just like gets lost in a book. You're like, oh, thank God they're keeping themselves busy. But then he loves reading so much that like I barely get to hang out with him. And so I thought, well, buddy, let's read a book together. I'll read you a book that is maybe has some words or written in a way that is a little bit more advanced it's actually a really well written book. Like, I'm like, damn, this is like a really good book. Like, I was crying first chapter. I'm like, what is wrong? And then it's just, we get these sweet cuddling moments again. And with my boy, I'm like, I don't know how many more moments like this I'll get. And there is some finite number of times we will cuddle on the couch. And even if he cuddles me till he's 42, there's still a finite number. And you never know when your last one will be. So I'm just trying to be more present with my kids.
Yeah, I know my husband always says, well, this might be the last time you pick him up. And I'm like,
yeah.
No! It's like heartbreaking. You know what? Another book that is amazing that I was reading more with my 10-year-old and almost 11-year-old is Chris Bosh's book, Letters to a Young Athlete.
But I haven't started it yet. It's good? Oh, great.
Phenomenal. Also, like a great, I feel like y'all talk about different things within the athletic world that are just so like, they both are so applicable to everyday life, like finding your why and your drive, and like you got to do it for you, and what are those reasons, not for your parents, not for money, but like all of that shit like goes away. Like what is that drive? So it's cool, you can put it towards school, towards friendships, towards life. It's pretty it's a pretty great read to read with.
It reminds me of like
kids as well.
This headline I saw earlier that was like, why college kids are struggling with anxiety and depression and things, that in the reason that has nothing to do with social media. And they were saying that it's parental over-involvement, and that it's continuing to be over-involved in their lives as young adults. And that the best thing you can do is, like, once you've helped them get into a college, if that's the path they're going to take, like, just back the fuck off, like let them do their thing. And it reminds me of, like, it's harder to identify your why and stay connected to your why when other people, whether that's a parent or a coach or whoever, is continuing to like poke you with their why or tell you what yours should be. And then that just delays your ability to connect with your own.
I agree. I totally agree. Especially, I live in Austin, Texas, and which is a great spot. And I'm guilty of all the sports that my kids are involved in, but like the amount of pressure and like, the drive of the parental driven like sport path is a real thing. And it doesn't allow the exploration for the kids to kind of like find their passion and find what they want to do. And like, mess up, like try different things multiple times, and finish it, follow it through, but then move on,
It's tough. It's tougher to do that than it's ever been, because it's harder to dip in and out of recreational sports for kids now. There's like fewer low bar opportunities to play that aren't kind of being professionalized, where there is the high stakes of getting cut from a team, not actually getting to play if you aren't taking it super seriously, if your parents aren't taking it super seriously. That's one of the things I love about running. And so if anyone on this thing is not sold yet, there's no cuts. And so you can start in 10th grade. Are you likely to win your first race if you start in 10th grade? No, but there actually is not. Like, I have friends that have made the Olympics that didn't start running track until 10th grade. Like, it's not because you don't have coaches selecting and all the politics and money involved. There's not as much of an advantage from starting young. In fact, it's probably the opposite. You start too young, you're less likely to have a chance to continue doing it throughout high school or college or for a lifetime. And I just love it's just such a fun sport. There is a secret.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like little part of me is,
sorry.
Maybe my son doesn't like sports at all, or maybe he's just waiting until he rolls out for his first day of cross country practice. Who knows?
Exactly. And like getting to know who he is and what fits for him. And you don't know. I mean, and even you had said, I'm going to kind of butcher this, but you really fell in love with the sport when you stopped competing and being super competitive. Like the love of it, you love it even more. And I feel like we're just so in it lately
Yeah.
to like accomplish and win. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's not what life is about.
Accomplish in the end.
Take a step back.
I think with movement and our kids is just like instilling in them that it's normal and good to move your body almost every day in some way. And that I want my kids to feel like a little bit like something's missing if they've gone a week without movement. Because not because they feel guilty or worried about the scale, but because they have positive associations with moving their body. They inherently feel the benefits of it to themselves. And so I don't want to put them in sporting environments that interfere with that joy and connection to their body. And it's going to be tricky as a parent, I think.
It always
shoot. I thought it was kidding.
Is there anything else that you would like your audience to know, and where can everyone find you?
I'm a Fleshman Fire on Instagram, as you can see. Feel free to give me a follow. I don't post all that much, but that's probably where I blog the most. It's Instagram blogs. And I hope if you are considering it, you read the book, because it's, even if you don't run, even if you don't really love sports, it's kind of like, to me, it's like how when I watched Seabiscuit, it was about horse racing, but it's really not about horse racing. It was about the Great Depression. It was about the human heart, all of those things. And so I really wanted to write my book in that way, where you're going to learn some stuff and you're going to end up looking in the mirror and confronting some of your own stuff, but it's also just like a story of the human condition and the emotions that are in the groundwater for all of us. And I think you'll like it.
Oh yeah, I think everyone will love it. It's fantastic. Please check out Lauren's book, Good for a Girl. I will post a link on where to buy it. And please give Lauren a follow. And we have gotten a couple of requests to have a Fleshman 5K in Paris. So I think that is the next thing that we should work on. I will be there.
Okay. Opportunity to speak with you and engage with the community. And thank you, everybody.
You're such a badass. Thank you so much. I so appreciate this.
And, I will.
Please keep on writing and running. All right. Thanks so much.